Hello. This video is about the basics of negative numbers. We're going to be doing comparing and ordering, including fractions and decimals, absolute value, and also opposites. Okay, pay careful attention. First thing I like to do is I like to put my number lines vertically because it makes more sense. I'll put 0 in the middle, I'll put 1 here, I'll put 2 here. One of the things that some people do is they will then go down here and they will put -2 here and -1 there. But you know better than that. I'm not going to have to go through that. 1 below 0 is not -2. 1 below 0 is -1. 2 below 0 is -2. Easy enough. I'm sure you understood those before. This should not be anything new to you. However, what about... Now you know that 1½ and 1 3/4 compare this way. 1½ is less than 1 3/4. You know that. However, what if it's not 1½ and 1 3/4? What if it is -1½ and -1 3/4? Well, let's zoom in. We know that 1½ is halfway between 1 and 2. -1½ is halfway between -1 and -2. -1½. And we also know that +1 3/4 is between 1½ and +2. The exact same way that -1 3/4 is between -1½ and -1 and -2. Therefore, -1½ is greater than -1 3/4. Similarly, -1.5 is greater than -1.75. It is greater because it is less negative. By the way, there are 3 ways to compare. This symbol means is greater than, and this symbol means is less than, and this symbol is equal to. Okay. Don't get those confused. There's lots of ways to remember. I don't care what way you use to remember, but remember. This one is greater than, this is less than, and this is equal to. Okay, so that's easy enough. Let's move on. One of the things that some people make the mistake of, they will say -3. Now we know that -3 is less than +2. And that's true, and that's good. That's not a mistake. The mistake that people say is that -3 is smaller than +2. And that's not true. -3 is not smaller than 2. 2 is not bigger than -3. Imagine it this way. Let's say that I start off at my house. Here I am, standing in my house. And I want to go to the store, which is off this way. Here's the store, and I want to go to it. Let's say I go out of my house and I walk in this direction 3 miles. Am I walking in the right direction? No. That direction would be -3. This would be standing for -3. So that's the wrong direction. That's why it's negative. Let's say that I go out of my house and I walk in this direction 2 miles. Is that the right direction? Yes, so that would be +2. However, let's think about how far I've walked. When I go on this side, I've walked 3 miles. When I go on this side, I've walked 2 miles. Which one did I go more? I went more when I went in the wrong direction. -3 has a lower value than positive 2, but negative 3 is bigger than positive 2. When we care about the size of things without caring about the direction, that's called absolute value. That's when we care about the size, but not the direction. The symbol for absolute value, here's negative 3, that's what we were talking about. The symbol for that is 2 parallel lines placed around it. And the absolute value of negative 3 is, how big is it? Well, how big is negative 3? It is 3 big. So the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. Let's try the number 2. Let's put the absolute value of that, and it's asking, how big is that? Well, how many is in it? Positive 2. So the consequence of this, asking about size and not direction, is that it is always positive. If the number starts out negative, it is positive. If the number starts out positive, it's still positive. Absolute value is always positive. You can't have a ruler that measures negative 3 inches. It only measures 3 inches, but in the wrong direction. But it's still 3 inches. So that's absolute value. Size without direction. Okay with that? So, one more thing, and that is opposites. Okay, that's 4. This symbol means the opposite of. The opposite, boy, my handwriting's bad, of. What is the opposite of positive 4? It is negative 4. And you can say to me, Mr. Zengerle, what's something's fishy here? Here you said that symbol means opposite of, and here you said that symbol means negative. Which is which? And my answer is, it doesn't make any difference. Doesn't matter which one you call it. Let's try another example. Let's try negative 2. I need to put parentheses around it because I want that negative symbol to go inside it. What's the value of that? That's still negative 2. Parentheses don't do anything to the value. But what is the opposite of it? Well, the opposite of it is positive 2. And there's 2 ways to think about it, and they're both correct. I could say this is 2. This makes it the opposite of 2, which is negative 2. And this makes it the opposite of that, or the opposite of negative 2, which is positive 2. Or, equally valid, I could say that this is negative 2, and this makes it the opposite of that, which is positive 2. So you see, it doesn't make any difference if you call that negative or if you call it the opposite. It means exactly the same thing. So this is the opposite of negative 2, or it is the opposite of 2. Still 2 either way. Try 1. I'm going to start off with 6.7. I'm going to do the opposite, and do the opposite of that. And remember, the parentheses don't do anything. It's this symbol here. I'm going to do the opposite of that, and I'm going to do the opposite of that. Think for a moment. What's going to be the value of this? Obviously, it's going to be either 6.7 or negative 6.7. You choose right now. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, do you have your answer? Let's see. This is 6.7. That makes it negative 6.7. That makes it positive. That makes it negative. That makes it positive. So this is 6.7. Positive 6.7. Notice, these 2 cancel each other out, and these 2 cancel each other out. When you have an even number, of those opposite signs, it ends up being positive. If you have an odd number of those opposite signs, it ends up being negative. Because even ones that cancel each other out, and then you have one left over, and that makes it negative. Okay, let's try a few examples. Ready? Negative 3.8 compared with negative 3.273. So, do we want it? Are they equal? No. Is it is less than, or is it is greater than? Well, in this case, it is less than, because this is more negative than this. Got the idea? Let's try the absolute value of negative 3.8 compared with the absolute value of negative 3.273. Now remember, we only care about the size when we're talking about absolute value. This is worth 3.8. This is 3.273. So in this case, this is greater than. Okay, let's try one more. Negative 7 billion. Positive 1.2. Well, what's the relationship? This one is less than, because this negative 7 billion is negative, and all negative numbers are less than all positive numbers. Get the idea? All right. Make sure you do your worksheet. Make sure you understand it. Write me any messages if you have any questions.